All right, I sat through another episode of Star Trek Discovery, this one called New Eden. Yes. Well, it was better than the first one, meaning the last episode, Brother, and was closer to a Star Trek style episode. Very simply, they have to use the spore drive and mention tardigrades, which, oh boy, thanks to that lawsuit, you think they'd want to get away from that, but you really can't since it was the core of the show. So, anyway, they make use of it in order to make a huge jump. Still tracking the mysterious red spots and what have you, or red entities, or however you want to put it. And this time it takes them to this planet, and they're receiving a distress call from it. And so Pike says, oh, well, we want to answer it and see if we can help these people or whatever. And they find this colony on it, and there's nothing going on. There's no problem. They're a little stumped by it. Then they realize, oh, they're pre-warp, but yet the readings show they're human beings. And they say, well, how can that be? Because the distance they are at, even at maximum warp, it would have taken them like over 100 years to get there. So which is why they had to use the spore drive to get there. And so then, oh, how'd that happen? Gee, I wonder how. Well, of course, it was the Red Angel, this mysterious entity that is now the core of this season for Star Trek. And of course, Michael Burnham has already seen the entity, and she doesn't tell Captain Pike until the end of the episode when she, after what they go through, realizes, hey, there might be something to this. I thought I was hallucinating, but yes, I did see the entity. They beam down to explore this place, but since they're people who are descended from people who were somehow transported to this planet from 200 years in the past. Well, that was a pre-warp time on Earth. So Captain Pike says, well, the Prime Directive is in play here, and so we can't reveal to them who we are and interfere with their culture that they've developed on this planet. So they get there, and a lot of this is rushed. They don't really have the time, but they just sort of fit in. And we're from the North, and yet they have to have them tell them the whole story of the origin of their culture and how this happened. And, well, don't you know? And none of them catch on except one guy who turns out he's a guy who suspects that this doesn't have anything to do with angels or God or anything like that. And that there's some sort of alien interference here, and he's hoping that they would one day get rescued by people from Earth who've developed the technology to do so, which is exactly what happened. Now, again, this is all very rushed, and that's a weak point of the show. I don't know how else they could do it unless it was like a two-parter or something like that to give them time to give some credence to all of this. But then again, that's, like I said, it's more of a template of old Star Trek, and they only had one episode to do things like this. So the other plots that I guess you could say they're the subplots, I don't know. But anyway, Stamets is recalling when he saw his deceased, were they married or not? I can't remember. But Hugh, the doctor who died in the last season because he got murdered by the Klingon agent. But he saw him when he was in the midst of the spore drive and all that. And he tells Tilly this, and he's a little nervous about using the spore drive again because he's afraid he'll see him, and also afraid he won't. And so later on, Tilly, she's trying to figure out how to fix it to where they can use the spore drive without having to have a human interface with it, so Stamets can quit being hooked up to it. And she's going to use that mysterious dark matter asteroid that they got in the last episode. And boy, she has all kind of trouble. It knocks her across the room and smashes her head against the wall. And it's so unstable, they don't know how to deal with it. And while in the sick bay, she's trying to come up with a plan to use it, but at the same time, there's an emergency. It turns out there's a wave of radioactive material going to crash into the planet and wipe out all the people down below. And due to the interference, they can't reach the captain and his team, and they can't do anything about it because they can't beam through it and all this stuff. They can't do shuttles. So, of course, Tilly comes up with this idea that, You can use the gravitational forces of the asteroid to use it as a magnet, drawing the radioactive asteroids and the rings around the planet to pull the radioactive material away. I'm not convinced that any of that's accurate. And besides, before it was so unstable, yet they're able to just use it rather easily with their tractor beams to kind of poop the asteroid out the back. and draw the radioactive asteroids within the planet's ring. There's a giant ring around it, and that's where the radiation is coming from. Anyway, so it works, and they save the day, and they're all, yay, we did it, and all that stuff. And then Tilly goes back to bed. But before this happened, she's trying to figure out a solution to this while in sick bay, and then suddenly this mysterious officer just is in the room, and Tilly, it kind of pushes her to the idea, and Tilly says, oh yeah, that's how. So then she runs off to the bridge to tell him how to do it. Right off the bat, you have to know that this woman that appears to her, yeah, that's not just an officer. That was like a ghost or what have you. She appears again on the bridge before Tilly leaves, and then she calls Tilly Stilly or something like that. And then Tilly's like, where have I heard that before? And then she realizes this woman was the adult version of a childhood friend. And she's like, I had no idea she was on this ship. And she tries to look her up on the computer, and she's not there. Eventually, the computer tells her, well, she's deceased. So there you go. Red Angel entity is speaking to them through this. So we can go back to the Red Angel entity was already speaking to Stamens in the last season through Hugh, while he was in the spore drive, and now Tilly's receiving an image from it, and probably will learn that Spock has experienced something similar. Pike reveals to Burnham that Spock is in a psych ward. He admitted himself. Didn't want anybody to know about it after some sort of bizarre experience. Well, obviously it had something to do with this, and it shook him so bad he had a nervous breakdown and is completely out of his Vulcan mind. So that's where he is, and eventually they'll get there, I'm sure. But I guess eventually Burnham's going to see dead entities, perhaps her former captain instead of the evil version of her, which she's going to see in the scenes, which I would rather they just drop all that. I don't care for the Klingons. I don't care if they had their hair back. I wish they would just avoid that. But they'll show up in the next episode. But so that's what eventually will happen, and it's very similar to like Lost. You know how the smoke monster could appear as dead people? Yeah, here we're using that again. And boy, you know that church, since when they showed a scene at the end there, Pike eventually decides, okay, I'll sort of violate the Prime Directive so I can talk to this guy. Jacob was his name, the one guy who figured out what was going on. And he talks to him, and he tells him, look, I need this camera on a soldier's helmet that they had from 200 years ago, who apparently documented or caught on film what happened as they were transported. And so Pike gets it. He trades a battery to the guy, and then like, oh, he tells him, yeah, you were right, but and the other people don't understand and all that. So he says, okay, great. So they exchange. He's got the camera. They watch it, and you see, at the last minute on the tape, the Red Angel appears as the bright lights are around the church doors, very much like the ending of Lost, where they all went into heaven from the church or whatever they were doing. And so no surprise there, considering who's in charge of this show. So this was not a great episode. Most of these aren't. Of course, the devastating problems with continuity remain. Maybe they could use this Red Angel entity to be all powerful and fixes things. That's what it was all about. It's conjured up as a result of some bizarre anomaly that ruined the timeline of Star Trek. But this was actually one of the better ones. And Burnham's in it, but she's not as annoying as she was in earlier ones, and primarily because she's just one of the crew here. She gets in a back and forth with Captain Pike, but they kind of have an honest discussion about whether or not they should tell these people. Burnham wants to, and Pike says, no, we're not going to do that. That's not the rules. And that's kind of a callback to Pike, because there's not a lot you can go by for Pike. I mean, you can go to the Kelvin version, but that's... this would be solved a lot if they just said this was the Kelvin universe. You can forget about the continuity problems. But the only thing you got is the cage. And Pike displayed in there is a very by-the-book type captain. He's not like Kirk, who he's very flexible. So that kind of, I thought, was a callback. If they were even thinking that, I don't know, but that's what it seemed to be to me. So, but that's about it. So they kind of work it out and everything, and it plays out more of a crew and a typical Star Trek plot where they beam down and deal with this strange culture and discover the story behind it and what the mystery was. But, of course, there's the ongoing plot of the Red Angel, and it gave you more little clues here. And obviously this is how the Red Angel is working and manipulating the Discovery to go rescue these people that had apparently deposited there 200 years ago. But you're the Red Angel, can't you just fix it yourself? And that seems to be what's going on here, and we'll find out as it goes forward if I care to do so. But yes, just being honest, this one was better than most. It's still not that great. There's so many problems, and like I said, the Red Angel needs to pull a Q and just use its omnipotent powers to reset the timeline. And that's how they could fix it. But I don't know that there's enough time left for this series going forward. But anyway, there you go. Star Trek New Eden, 2 out of 5 stars for this one. But the previews of the next episode, it doesn't look good to me. But this one kind of gives a clue and a template for an idea of where they should go and how they should structure the show. But again, with the damage to continuity, without that fixed, it really doesn't matter. But this was a little bit better of delivering this show than the previous ones. So there you go. All right, thanks for watching and listening. Say, while you're here, why not like and subscribe? And check out that link description below. That'll take you to my mini stores that have plenty of goodies for you.